Morning, everybody. Hopefully everyone's doing well. If you can start with some green check marks so I know you're with me, and then we will get started. If you haven't figured it out yet, I did post the grades to the midterm in the course. So if you go into your grades, you should be able to see your midterm grade. And generally speaking, everyone did fairly well. So I was really kind of impressed with a lot of people did better than I expected, which was kind of a pleasant surprise for me. And that was good. So I see you have some checks, which is good. In terms of your grades for the semester, assuming you're caught up, assuming you've got all your learning guides in, all 8 learning guides and 8 tests written, and 8 chapters worth of quizzes done, your grade's not going to change that much. The only thing I've yet to mark is the learning guide for the midterm, which some of you submitted yesterday and brought it to me at the exam, and then I haven't had a chance to check online to see who submitted them. But in the bottom of Unit 8, let's see if I can find it, it says final exam, and final exam review package is right here. So that is where you're going to submit the learning guide from the final exam. Computer's a little slow today. There you go. So just like always, you have a submit, add submission, a little rubric. You guys know the routine there. So if you haven't had a chance to upload the review for the final midterm number 2, whatever we're going to call it, if you could do that today, that would be good. And that'll basically be your last mark. So assuming you've handed everything in, your mark's not going to change that much. If you have a few things to hand in, your mark can go up. And on, I guess, Thursday afternoon probably, I'm going to go through, and if there's something missing, like a learning guide or anything like that, I'm going to put in a 0, so that will bring your grade down a little bit. And the quizzes, I haven't been really kind of harping on you guys to get the quizzes done. I said right from the get-go, the beginning of the course, they weren't going to count for that much. I think all of the quizzes in total count for, I think it's 10% of your overall grade. And then, you know, there's so many quizzes, so each one counts for, it's less than 0.5% each. So if you do them, it's a mark booster. If you don't do them, I'm not going to be too concerned. It was more of a benefit to you because when you do the quizzes, you're running into questions that are going to pop up on the exam. So it was kind of like a sneak peek into the exams, and hopefully that would help you guys out. So if you didn't do the quizzes, I'm not terribly concerned about it. For the learning guides, it doesn't seem like we get marked for what we got right and wrong, just if we completed it. Is that true? Yeah. So it's more of a sort of completion thing. If you, basically the learning guides were there. I mean, you have the answers. You don't necessarily have solutions, but I go through some of the more difficult questions in class. So assuming you're going through them, checking your answers as you go, there's really no reason to get an answer wrong. And if you do get one wrong, you can just ask me and I can go over it in class. So those learning guides are there. So I can see you are, making progress. If you're making common mistakes along the way that are kind of repeated, I can identify that before you write the test. So it's kind of just like a checkpoint before you write the test, the learning guides. And they're marked on the rubric. So, 0 to 50% done, 50 to 75, 75 to 100% complete. If you are getting a few questions wrong, it's not the end of the world. I just want to see that you've done the work. So that would be correct. Yes, you're still able to rewrite a test. The only thing I asked of you was that you showed me that you've done some review in order to rewrite that test. Show me some work outside of the course that you've done. So I think that's kind of it for the grades. I'm just going to jump back to the course here, and I will mention a few more things. Assuming everything's done, your grade should be final, with the exception of one learning guide. So everyone who's kind of caught up, that's the case. If you want to rewrite a test, that's going to help your grade, hopefully. And on Thursday, anything that's outstanding, learning guides, tests, whatnot, I will put in a 0, just because it's not been submitted. I can't give you credit for it. And I mean, everyone's doing fairly well. I did contact a few people yesterday. There's the kind of the bubble that I'm really concerned about. If you have, around 50 to 60%, that final exam has an impact on your mark. I mean, if you go into the final exam with 50% in the course, and then you write the exam and you get 48% on the exam, that brings your mark down and you don't pass the course. So basically what I want everybody to be in a position to go into the exam where the exam isn't going to have an effect on you passing or failing Math 10. That's not a good feeling to go in with that kind of pressure. So I really want everyone to do all that they can to get above that 63%, because that means the final exam doesn't matter. You just go in, do your best, and that's all. You're not relying on the final to get you through the course. So just keep that in mind. For those of you who have really good marks, that's terrific. The final exam is difficult for a few questions, but generally speaking, you'll do fairly well. And if you want to get back at me, if you think, Mr. Borden, you're a terrible teacher, or Mr. Borden, you're a great teacher, you want to get back at me, your final exam is an opportunity to do that. So if you go into the exam with, let's say 85%, and you write the exam, you can do two things. You can get a really high mark on it, or you can get a really low mark. So if you get a really low mark, that makes me look bad, because obviously I inflated your grades. If you get a really high mark, that makes me look bad as well. So if you're like, I'm going to get you, Mr. Borden, you have two options. Hopefully you get a really good mark on the exam that's a lot higher than your in-class mark, and then we can re-look at your grade and do things like that. So there you go. That's a great question, Alex. Before I get into this lesson, wait, does the provincial affect our mark? Yeah, it's 20% of your grade. So when we are done, so on Thursday, you can look at your percentage in the course, and your final percentage in the course is showing up at the bottom of your grades page now. I fixed it a couple weeks ago, but I completely forgot to tell you guys. So your final exam grade counts for 20%, so just, 0.2 times whatever you got on the final. And then your in-class is 80%. So let's say you had, 80%, you multiply that by 0.8. That's going to give you your percentage, and then you do the same thing with your exam, multiply by 0.2, and then add them together, and that's going to be your final grade. So, yeah, that's a good point, Abby. When you don't feel pressure, you're going to do better. So there's anxiety and stress involved with it. I didn't want to tell you guys this because I didn't want to add a bunch of stress and anxiety, but the test you guys wrote yesterday, I think it actually counted for a little bit more than your provincial exam is going to count for. So now that we got it out of the way, you can throw that out there. I don't want to say I tricked you or anything, like the percentages were all in the course outline, but the exam you guys wrote yesterday, I think it counted for like 25% of your overall grade, and then the provincial counts for 20%. So you guys did a great on the test yesterday, most of you, so nothing to worry about. How long is the final exam? As one thing I wanted to talk a little bit about was timing. So we wrote a test yesterday which was 32 multiple choice, and I forget now, I think it was 6 written. And so that was 38 questions. Your provincial exam, 60 questions. Verify that. I have one next to me. Yeah, it's always 60 questions. Remember the first 12 questions you don't get a calculator for, then you write the middle section with your calculator. And then, the last section you have to fill in the boxes. So one really interesting test strategy is, not interesting, I think it's worthwhile, and I learned this when I was in high school. So when you are writing a test, let's say the provincial exam, to answer your question, Alex, you get 3 hours maximum. So it's designed to take 2 hours, 60 questions, 2 hours. but you get the 3, you get that additional hour. So when I was in high school, I had to write provincial exams for all of my subjects in grade 12, and I had to write them all at the end of the year because it was kind of a linear timetable. So at the end of my grade 12 year, I wrote English, Spanish, physics, chem. There's one more. Socials maybe? No. Anyways, I'd write 5 provincial exams in the span of about 5 days. So I had 2 some days, and it was a lot all at once. So there was always a written section on the exam and then multiple choice. So when you go to sit down and write an exam, if you're worried about time, like the math exam, I recommend you do the questions that are written first, because if you completely run out of time, you can just go back and guess on the multiple choice and you have a 25% shot at getting it right. But if you leave the written till the end, then all of a sudden you're gonna have to guess on the written and you have like less than 1% chance of getting those questions right. It's just like there's infinite possibilities when it comes to some of these numbers. So that might be something to consider. I don't foresee anyone having troubles staying within the 3 hours. The test doesn't usually take that long. But it might be a strategy to consider. So you have that first 40 minutes where you can't use your calculator, you do the first 12 questions, get that out of the way. You can't avoid that. And then you have the rest of the time to do the middle section or the last section. And you might, if you're in a flow, you might just want to continue on through. Another strategy is, you get to a question you don't know, like immediately, just throw a star next to it, flag it on the computer, and then move on. And then go through the entire test until you get to the end, do all those kind of written ones, and then go back to the start. I know a lot of students do that, and that's a really great strategy as well. So that kind of, keeps you going linearly through the core or through the test, and you're not going to miss anything or forget anything. But if there's something that you don't immediately remember how to do, just throw a star next to it, come back to it at the end, go through the test again, and then, keep skipping questions until you have either lots of time left or no time left. And then that way you're not guessing on questions you could know at the end of the test. You're guessing on the hard ones you've already, spent a little bit of time on, but didn't have a chance to do that. So, in terms of the midterm, you're welcome to come in tomorrow, 1 to 3, and look at your midterm, and I'd be happy to go over any mistakes you might have made and we can talk about it. Or if you just want me to scan it and email it to you, I'd be happy to do that as well. It just takes me a second to scan it. So, if you were interested in seeing where you went wrong on the midterm, just either send me a message in Moodle or an email, or if you want to come in tomorrow, you're welcome to go through that exam with me. So that's kind of what I want to say about that. We do have today's class, tomorrow's class, and Thursday's class. So we have 3 classes left. And I've been going through a practice exam. I have it out again. I'd like to maybe go through a few more questions on it and give you guys some more time to work through it. For a lot of you, it's kind of a matter of review now. But judging by the marks on the midterm you guys wrote yesterday, sections 5, 6, 7, and 8, you guys, generally speaking, did a lot better on the second half of the course than you did the first half. And the first half is more difficult, just kind of the way the units lined up. So, if you want to focus some of your review on maybe more of the chapters 1 through 4, stuff you haven't seen for a while, that'd probably be a good idea. I'm going to go into this exam. Now, some of you printed it off and have been going through it with me. This is the one from the course. Let's see if I can find it here. Practice exam in class January 13th and 14th. So it is in the bottom unit, getting ready for the provincial exam. There is this practice exam I'll continue to go through. I put the answer key up, so just my answers. And if you want to go through that, you can. There's a practice provincial exam in here as well, which is just another test that is built into the course, kind of like all the ones you've been doing. It takes a couple questions from each section, 60 questions, kind of a provincial exam. So if you wanted to do that, that's there as well. It's optional. You don't necessarily have to do it, but for those of you who are looking for more practice, there it is. I also have a few other provincial exams. If you want to have a look at them, you can just send me a message and I can fire you them off. I don't have answer keys for all of them, but if you just want to look at some questions, then we can make that happen. So you guys have lots of options. Avery, you're asking another good question. Is there anything else we need to submit for the rest of the term? No, assuming you handed in your learning guide for the provincial exam, or not the provincial, sorry, the midterm yesterday, then you're caught up. Does the provincial exam give you marks? It is actually counted in your gradebook, so I'll make you a deal. If you do it and it increases your mark, I'll count it. If it makes your mark go down, then I will exclude it. So just kind of, if you want to write it, there you go. It can only help your mark. That's seems like a pretty good deal to me. So if you're looking at another way to improve your mark, there's that practice provincial, and you can go through that, and it'll maybe help your mark out. If it hurts your mark, just send me a message and I'll, take it off there. I think it's in for like 5% or less, so it's basically worth like 2 tests. That's kind of what it's scaled in the course. So, practice exam in class, January 13, 14. I'm going to continue on with this, point out a few things, go through some questions, and the key is there online, so you can just see my work if you want. So far we went through the first 12 questions. I went through all of them because they were the 12 that you don't get a calculator for. So I want to make sure everyone's on the same page when you go to sit down for your provincial. First 12 questions, no calculator, and you can see up in the top corner behind my head here, it says suggested time 30 minutes and allowable time 40 minutes. So you do get 40 minutes. After 40 minutes, you must submit that section, and then you're allowed to pick up your calculator and continue on. You can continue on past question 12 without a calculator. If you finish early, that's fine. But remember, those first 12 questions you have to do in the first 40 minutes. So, if you don't understand how to do one, you can't just leave it till the very end of the exam and come all the way back to it. You have 40 minutes. Once that 40 minutes is up, that first 12 questions get submitted and you'll never be able to see them again. So I don't want anybody to be surprised by that. Did I find out the correct answer on page 9? No, I think we decided it was B. Or no, it was D. I'll look at it again. Now I'm confused. So that's part A. And then you can see even part B, question 13, you won't need a calculator for something like this. It's just asking about graphing it. I think we decided it was D based on, I think it was Taylor put in his definition of profit, and we liked D, so we stuck with D. So we'll go with D. There you go. And then I think I gave you guys some time to work. I did a bunch of these questions, and I didn't do some of them. So maybe I'll just jump to 16 and I'll plug away. If you have something that you want me to look at specifically, I'll be happy to do it, but I'll just kind of point out a few of the maybe trickier questions or questions that have something I can help you along the way with. Question 16 has 3 groups of graphs, and basically it's asking about slopes. Do you understand slopes? What a positive slope is, a negative slope, and then the difference between a vertical line and a horizontal line. Remember, a vertical line has an undefined slope, a horizontal line has 0 slope. So that's what the question's asking. You can see the choices for lines here. So group A, this is group A here, these are going up and to the right, so these are both positive slopes. These are going down and to the right, so these are both negative slopes. And then these ones have horizontal lines, so the slope is 0 for both of these. But when we look at the solutions, it says group A, all the graphs have a positive slope. That's a correct statement. Group B, all the graphs have a negative slope. Yeah, that's correct. In group C, all the graphs have an undefined slope. So that is incorrect. They have 0 slope. So this question is testing, do you know what positive, do you know what negative, and do you know what 0 is? So which rows of his explanation did he make a mistake? And it was in row 3. So this is one of these kind of tricky ways they ask these types of questions. It's not, does the line have a positive slope? Well, yeah, I can figure that out. It's basically asking you 3 questions in one. And there's lots of questions on the exam that kind of look like this. Instead of testing your knowledge of one concept, they test your knowledge of multiple concepts at one time. So that was 16. 17, fuel consumption of cars. This was a deceptively difficult question. And when I read it the first time, I kind of was like, wow, I can't believe they actually asked that, but they did. The reason this is a difficult question is because it says fuel consumption for cars is measured in liters per 100 kilometers. So normally when we find the slope of a line, it's just, the slope is 5. That's 5 over 1. But in this question, all of a sudden we have liters, so how many liters of fuel? Instead of it being over 1, they are putting it over 100. So it makes it really kind of confusing. So which of the following graphs has a slope of 12 liters per 100 kilometers? Which is even more confusing. So if I look at my first line here, I have my intercepts. I have 60 and I have 500. So if I wanted to find the slope, I'm going to go 60 liters is up here. Divided by 500 kilometers. And then normally I just go 60 divided by 500, and I end up with 0.12, is that right? Yes, so I get 0.12 liters per kilometer. And I look and I say, well, that's not the right answer because I was looking for something that was 12 liters. So I think this is wrong, and I move on. The tricky bit here is, again, they're not asking for liters per 1 kilometer, they're asking for liters per 100 kilometers. So if you think of it this way, you take your 60 liters, you take 5 times 100 kilometers, and then we do the division here, 60 divided by 5. So 60 divided by 5 gives me 12 liters divided by 100 kilometers. So this, in fact, is the right answer, but it's not something that we've talked about per se. It's maybe a little bit more specific. That was a kind of an evil question. As well, you have the different axes to deal with on the graph, and yeah, it was a difficult question. So we had distance divided by fuel, and then we had like 500 liters. Well, that seems like a pretty big fuel tank, 500 liters. So I'm going to probably, get rid of that guy. So that doesn't make sense. The bottom two, fuel and tank, 500 liters again in your tank. I would get rid of D. And then that leaves distance 560. What's the difference between letter A and C? Well, A, if I do the slope, for A, I'm going to have liters per kilometer, which is what it asked for. The slope down here is rise of kilometers and then run of liters. That's upside down from what the question asked for. So I can get rid of C. So that's a difficult question. And it was deceptive. It looked like a really straightforward reading information from a graph question, and then it ended up being quite a difficult question. Question 11 is tricky. Okay, I'll go back to 11. Do we put the dependent or independent on the x? Ava's right, independent goes on the x. So independent is generally time. It could be a lot of things, but generally speaking, it's going to be time. Wasn't the case here, but usually will. Number 11, we did a few days ago. 11 is a difficult question for sure, but a pretty straightforward concept if you just look at your formula sheet to look at the equations that you're given there. So yeah, take it for an easy mark instead of a difficult one. All right. Point is on the line with the slope. Which of the following points are on the line? I don't know if this is difficult, but first thing you need to do is come up with the equation of the line, and then you have to plug the point in. So it's a way of asking you which of the following points is on the line. You have to check all of them. You can't just say, oh, this one is or that one is. There's no easy way to do it. So maybe I'll do this. You're given a point. You're given a slope. So I'm going to probably put this into point slope form. And if you recall, that is y minus y1 is mx minus x1. So this is x1, y1, and then my slope is here. So I'm going to have y plus 9, change my sign, is negative 4 over 5, and then x minus 5. So now I have the equation of a line, and I need to plug all of the points. This is x, y. I plug them in for x, y. The left side should equal the right side. It turns out that A is the correct answer. You could also, just draw a little graph. Okay, point 5, negative 9. So I go to 5, negative 9. I have a point right here. I know my slope is negative 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 over 5. And I have a line that's going to go something like that. And then I try to, look at my points. Negative 5, 0. Is that on the line? 10, 13. I could, plot my points on my graph to figure out which ones may be close to kind of, narrow it down so I don't have to try all 4. Just might save you some time that way. But that is not a terribly difficult. 19, what's the slope? So just using the slope formula, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. That is on your equation sheet. So you do not need to memorize that. You just need to know when to use it. Two lines are parallel. One has a slope, one goes through the point. What is the possible value of k? This is one of these questions where I've never seen a question like this before, and I would imagine very few teachers would have assigned a question like this to their students. And it's just a matter of, do you understand? So I kind of hesitate to give you lots and lots of different examples because it just kind of wastes your time. But if you understand it, you're doing okay. So it's worth going through. It's a difficult question, and we just take the information we know and kind of go with it. So two lines are parallel. So that means the slope of line 1 is equal to the slope of line 2. They're the same thing. So if line 1 has a slope of 4, then line 2 also has a slope of 4. Goes through a point, and what's the possible value of k? All right, so I know what the slope is, and I have 2 points. So I'm going to use my slope formula. M is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And I'm going to call this x1, y1, my first point, x2, y2. I'm going to plug everything in. So I know my slope is 4. It says the lines are parallel. y2 is k squared. y1 is 5. x2 is 2. And x1 is 1. You'll notice the only thing I have here is k. It's my only variable, so I want to solve for k, because it asks what is the possible value of k. So we want to solve for k. So I'll leave the 4 on the left. I'm going to have k squared minus 5. I'll go 2 minus 1 on the bottom is 1. And then I can just get rid of it, because I don't have to write divided by 1. I can add 5 to both sides. End up with 9 is k squared. And then I solve for k by taking the square root of both sides. And I end up with 3 is equal to k. I look for the answer, and it's B. So, once you sit down and do the work for a question like that, not terribly difficult. but some students will see this k squared and they'll be like, oh my goodness, I've never seen anything like that before, kind of panic, and then just kind of give up. Well, no. Use the information you know to try to solve it. You know the slope formula, you know you have 2 points, and you have the slope. Go from there. So it's not impossible, but it's nothing you've likely seen before, which makes it a little bit trickier. We talked about 21. I think Taylor might have asked about that one last day. Use the relation below. What of the following is true? So, you know, y-intercept -4. I can see that the y-intercept's up here. So -4 for the y-intercept, automatically going to get rid of those two. And then y-intercept's +3. So yep, that's right. And that's right. And then the slope is 4/3 or 3/4. Well, I don't know. Let's find a point here. Let's start at our y-intercept. I find another grid point where it crosses exactly at the grid point. So there's one, rise, 1, 2, 3, run, 1, 2, 3, 4. So rise, 3, run, 4. So answer C. Taylor, what question are you asking about? Could you quickly graph that one? Are we talking about 22 or something else? (23) converting to general form, pretty straightforward. Rewrite in slope-intercept form, pretty straightforward. Which of the following equations? What I should mention about number 23 and 24 is that is that 23 and 24 both kind of give away some information. So on your equation sheet, your formula sheet, you have the three different types of lines. You have slope-intercept, slope point, and general form. Let's say you get to the test and you're like, oh no, I've forgotten which one's which. These two questions give you some information. Let's say you forgot what general form is, but question 23 says write this in general form. So, okay, if I'm writing it in general form, all of the answers should be in general form. And I look at my answers and I see that I have x plus y, and they all equal 0. Everything's on the left side, it's equal to 0. So these are all in general form. So if you were to forget, you could look at that question and it gives you some information with general form. And then same here, slope-intercept form, all of the answers are in slope-intercept form. So it makes it a little bit more straightforward. Do you like Wilson primes? I don't know what Wilson primes are, sorry. And the one you just did with the K2, could I graph it? I don't have any graph paper. On your provincial exam, you will be given some graph paper, so you could graph it if you wanted. You're thinking, so if I had a graph, is this kind of what you're asking, Taylor? I had a graph, and then I know point 1 and 5 is on it. So I have my point here, 1, 5. And then I know the slope is 4, so 1, 2, 3, 4 over 1. Draw a line. And then I have this point 2. And then I could figure out where this is, and it looks like it's at 2, 3. Could you do that? Yes, 100%. If you, on a test, if you're unsure, you want to graph that. If you draw a very accurate graph, that's going to give you a pretty good indication of the answer. I mean, looking at the other solutions, 1, 2, 3, and 4.5, you know it's going to cross a grid point because all of these solutions are integer except for the first one. So, you know, graphing it is a very viable way to solve a question like that, assuming you didn't want to do it algebraically. I'm always a bit hesitant to graph things though, because sometimes it's really difficult to read a graph if it's not a whole number. So, I don't know. Take it for what it's worth, and if you want to graph it to solve it, there's nothing wrong with that. Which of the following equations represents a line passing through the points? So you need to substitute both points into all of the equations. That's one way to do it. Or you could, convert these into slope-intercept form and then find the slope of these 2 points and see if the m for all of these is the same as the slope. There's a lot of different ways to do 25, and no way is more correct than the other. I would probably just kind of get to it and say, well, I don't want to do anything terribly difficult with it, so I could just substitute this point in, then this point in, and see if left equals right, and if it does, then it's the answer. Yeah. Line A and B are perpendicular, intersect on the y-axis. The equation of line A is this. What is the equation of line B in slope-intercept form? 26 is one of these maybe a little bit trickier questions. And the tricky part about it is that they intersect on the y-axis is an important piece of information, but it doesn't really jump out. It's not a number, so it might not kind of jump off the page at you. So lines A and B are perpendicular, and this is line A. So the slope of line B is going to be 2 over 3, because 2 over 3 is perpendicular to negative 3 over 2. Remember, we have negative reciprocal slopes. The other information here is this intersect on the y-axis. This point, I'll call it P. If line A has a y-intercept of +4, that means that if I drew a graph, it's going through the intersection, the vertical axis, at that point there. So I know that it's going through the vertical axis at 0, 4. And that's where these 2 lines intersect. So now I have a point, 0, 4, and I have a slope, all for line B. Now I can use that point and a slope to figure out some information. Now, if this line has a y-intercept of +4 and this one also does, they're perpendicular and they intersect there, well, I know that the y-intercept has to be +4, and automatically B and D don't have a y-intercept of +4. I also need to know from the information that the slope is 2 over 3. What did I do here? 2 over 3. Sorry, I crossed that one off because it was negative, but it wasn't. So this one has a slope of 2 over 3 and a y-intercept of +4, which were the 2 pieces of information I was given. When we have perpendicular lines, Taylor, it's negative reciprocals. So if we had an initial slope of 3 over 2, if I flip it, it becomes 2 over 3. And then if I add a negative sign, I have 2 negatives, so it's positive. So negative reciprocal there. So you don't even need to do anything fancy to find the equation of a line or anything like that. You can just use the information you're given. So that was 26. 27, determine the slope point form of line that passes through and is perpendicular. I mean, sometimes students see questions without numbers in them, and they get a little bit, flustered. They're like, oh no, I don't see any numbers. How am I going to do this? Well, take the information you know. You have a point, and it's perpendicular to this line. Okay, this line has a slope. This is y is mx plus b, and there's no b. So A, that's probably the first thing, is going to be kind of weird. You don't see its y-intercept because it doesn't have one. So the slope is 1 over w. What is a perpendicular slope to 1 over w? Negative 1 over w. So I flip it. I get w over 1. It was negative, so I add a negative, so I get positive w. So instead of writing it like that, I could just write it as w. So there's my slope. And then my point. I have a point P, which is Q, R. Okay, I want it in, well, look at all these. They're all in slope point form. So I'm going to have y minus y1 is m x minus x1. Here's x1, y1. Here's m. Plug it all in. I'm going to get y minus r is w x minus q. Is that one of the answers? Yeah, that happens to be C. So even though it doesn't have any numbers in it, it's not something that you kind of need to panic about. You know, you just work through a question similar to that. You can go from there. Take the information you know. Look at all the answers. They're all in slope point form. So take slope point form, plug in the point, plug in the slope. Don't get afraid when there's no numbers. It's not something to be scared about. 28 is pretty straightforward, quick one. It says f of negative 2. What is f of that? Remember, it's f of x. This is saying x is negative 2. So I find negative 2 for x, and I look up, and I see d, and I look down, and I don't see anything, so it's going to be d. I forget f of x and g of x is the same thing. Yeah, I love that like auto emoji thing happening there, Avery. Yeah, sometimes we say function is f, sometimes we call it g, sometimes we call it h. It doesn't really matter what we call it. F is kind of nice because f kind of reminds you of function, but g of x and h of x, you could have q of x, p of x, l of x, anything. They all essentially mean the same thing. When you start dealing with functions a little bit later on, you'll see how it doesn't matter. You just get used to seeing it. But they are the same thing. So the question could have read, you know, g of negative 2, and this is y is g of x, and you would have ended up at the same spot. Yeah, how did I do it? Sure. The trick here, there's no trick. It says f of negative 2, and the negative 2 is taking the x's spot. So I've replaced x with negative 2. Okay, so I know that the graph has a point, an x point of negative 2, and it has a y point of something, but I don't know what that something is, so I can go to the graph and figure out what it is, because it says this is what your function looks like. So I find x is negative 1, I find x is negative 2, and then sometimes I'll have like a line or something like that, and I'd go up to my line and find the point. In this question, I don't have a line, I just have a bunch of dots, which is fine. But it's just saying, can you find negative 2 for x? And then you can see here my y value is positive 5. So I would have f of negative 2 is equal to 5. So that means my point is x, negative 2, 5. There's my x, there's my y. Hopefully that clears things up. So that was function notation, and the function was a bit of a strange one. Could we quickly go over, I see they wouldn't ever give us a question without a graph. They could give you a question. I'm just trying to think if there's one in here somewhere. They could give you a question like this. They could say, okay, you know, y is equal to, or they could say, let's pick g of x just to be different. G of x is equal to 2x plus 5. And then they could say, find g of 2. So you'd go, okay, I'm going to put a 2 in for the x. So g of 2, everywhere there's an x, I'm going to replace with a 2. So 2 times 2 plus 5. So 2 times 2 is 4, plus 5 is 9. So g of 2 is 9. And then I'd look for 9. They could do the opposite way as well. They could say, same question, g of x is equal to, 2x plus 5. And they could say g of, I don't know, pick a number that I think is going to work. Add 5, minus 5. Let's go with 9. They say g of x equals 9. What's the value of x? So then you'd say, okay, well they want the whole thing. This g of x is equal to 9. So I get 9 is 2x plus 5. Subtract 5. I get 4 is 2x. Divide by 2, I get x is equal to 2. So those are both ways they could ask a question like that, going forward or going backwards. So there you go. 29, following system equations. Here you could just continue the lines on and then go from there, and that would work. So, I'm just going to give you like 5 minutes, and I want you to just kind of look ahead a little bit and see if you can find some questions you want to go through instead of me just doing work all day. And start at 29 and just go on from there. And I'll come back in 5 minutes and see if you guys have any questions. All right, guys, welcome back. Did anything pop out at you guys while you were going through the sort of last half of the test? Anything that looked tricky? Anything you didn't understand? Anything at all? If not, I'll just keep going and plug away with some of the questions that I think are a little bit more difficult. Nobody had anything that came up? Maybe 5 minutes wasn't enough? All right, I'll just keep going then. I guess 29 was maybe a bit tricky because, thanks Taylor, the questions, the lines weren't drawn as full lines across the graph. There was only just little segments. So the first thing I did was I grabbed my ruler and just continued the lines all the way across the little plots. And then I could see where they intersected. That was kind of the tricky bit there. 32, 33, and 36. Definitely. Infinite number of solutions. So now we're into solving systems of equations, looking for either, different slopes. If it's the same slope, does it have the same y-intercept? Does it the same line? This one is asking for an infinite number, so that means they're the same line. So we're looking for two lines that are that have the same equation. That one was A because it was just this guy down below is just 2 times the one up above to get from there to there. That was a pretty obvious one. 41, thanks Abby. Let's get on to Taylor's question here, 32. Perimeter of an isosceles triangle is 28 inches. The length of each equal sides is 1 inch less than 2/3 of the length of the third side, which the following systems represents this situation. So I guess this one's a little bit complex because you're trying to decipher what they're talking about in terms of the two equations. Let's see, what did I do here? So the perimeter of an isosceles triangle is 28 inches. That means we have a triangle that has 2 sides that are equal. I didn't think this was, I don't really get much say with these provincial exams, but it didn't seem super fair to me that they're asking about the definition of an isosceles triangle. That's not likely something you'd remember, but anyways, if we called this side x and this side y, we'd have 2 times the length of side x plus the length of side y is 28. So that gives us a bit of a hint as to which one. So I automatically see C here doesn't have anything like that, so I'm going to get rid of C. So now I'm just looking at the 3 other options. And then the second piece of information, the length of each of the equal sides is 1 inch less than 2/3 the length of the third side. That's a lot to take in. Let's see if we can break it down. As soon as I see the word is, that is an equal sign. 1 inch less, that's going to be -1. And then 2/3 the length of the 2 sides. So the length of each of the equal sides, so the length of x, those are the equal sides, is, and then 1 inch less, so I'm going to subtract 1, and then 2/3 of the other side. So if I put it in like that, do I have anything that kind of looks similar? 2/3 x minus 1. I'm liking this guy. Because this is y is the side that's kind of by itself, and then we had x, which we called the same sides. So that's a bit of a tricky one. At least we don't have to solve the system, we just had to set it up. So that was maybe a difficult one. 33, using different prime numbers, the prime factorization of x, y is, so the least common multiple is taking the largest power of each prime. So what this is saying is these are the prime factorizations. So if I took a factor tree of x, I would end up with a, I would end up with b cubed, and I would end up with c squared. And same thing for y. If I did a factor tree, I would break it down, and eventually I'd end up at a squared, b squared, and c. So when I find the least common multiple, I'm taking the greatest exponent of each of my powers. So here I have a squared, I'm going to take that, that's the biggest of the a's, then I have b cubed, and then c squared. So that turns out to be answer C, a squared, b cubed, and c squared. That was kind of back to the definition of our least common multiple that we talked about. And there's two ways to find the LCM. This way forces you to remember that piece of information, so it's a bit of maybe a bit more of a difficult type one. 32, 33, 36, and then 41, and then maybe we'll call it a day there. So 33, 34, 35, 36. Which of the following is equivalent? Okay, when I'm multiplying my exponents with the same base, I need to add my exponents. So this is getting to our exponent laws. So if I'm going to add 2 over 5 and 3 over 2, I need to have a common denominator. So in this case, it's looking like it's going to be 10. So I'm going to multiply by 2 over 2 here, and I'm going to multiply by 5 over 5 here. So 2 times 2 is 4 over 10 plus 15 over 10. Add those together, I get 19 over 10. And then I just really need to remember that this is all x to the power of 19 over 10. And then I get back to my flowers of power, roots the root. If you recall that, I have my little flower up at the top here, growing, then I have my ground, and then the roots on the bottom. Because all of my answers aren't in nice exponent form like this. So I need to rearrange it into radical form. So the power was 19, that stays up here, and the root was 10. And that was D. So again, they're testing 2 exponent laws at one time. They're testing, do you know when you multiply, you add your exponents, same base, add your exponents, and then they're testing, can you convert a fractional exponent, a rational exponent, into a root? So that's the second piece there. Abby asked about number 41, so we'll jump down there. 39, 40, 41. Determine the factors of the area model. So we're looking at algebra tile type question. Remember, each one of these is a length, and each one of these is a length, and then on the provincial, it'll be in color, so it'll be a little bit easier. These would likely be red. So what length is this side? Well, that's length x, and that's length x. And they're all not shaded, so they're all going to be positive x. And then I have a bunch of ones here, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's 5 there together, but they're red, so it's negative 5. So in total, I have 3 x's, and I have minus 5. And then here I have an x, and then I have 1, 2, and 3. So that's going to be 2x plus 3. So if I were needing to factor that, here are my factors. 2x plus 3, and then I have 3x minus 5. And I see these are both plus 5, and then I have 2x plus 3 here. So that's A for 41. So hopefully that helps you out. And you can see the type of question you're going to usually end up with dealing with algebra tiles. I didn't spend a ton of time on them because generally speaking, you're going to end up with a question like this. Nothing more difficult than that. So just can you understand what each of those tiles represents? If it asks for the area, or if it asks you to expand, you have x squareds, x squareds, x squareds. And then you have, x1, x. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So there's 9 x's in total. And then you have negative x's here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you have negative 10x. And then all of these ones down here. 1, 2, 3 by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you have minus 15. So if I took that and multiplied it, I would end up with 6x squared. I'd have plus 9x minus 10x. And then minus 15. So just taking it a step further, that's another question they could ask with a similar type setup. I'm going to just leave there for today. You guys have been working really hard. You had your test yesterday, and I know you probably didn't want to come to class and do a ton of work, but you guys do have your provincial next Wednesday, and I mean, it's up to you to kind of review and get as much done as you can in terms of review. So if you're still intending to get caught up, it'd be great to have everything done by Thursday, Friday afternoon at the latest. And I would love it if you guys continue to work through this exam and come back tomorrow with a few more questions. I don't have a lot planned for the next few classes. I guess we have 2 more. So I'm just going to continue working through this. We're at 40, so we have about 20 questions left. Probably get it done tomorrow. I'd love it if you guys had questions just in general. You know, Mr. Borden, I just not understanding exponents, exponent laws, or, you know, radicals, anything like that. Come with those questions the next couple days and we'll go from there. So Mrs. Ward will be in the studio at 10:30. So you need to jump over to her Blackboard. You can maybe even keep the live feed up or it'll switch, so you'll have to close it. But come back at 10:30, so you get a bit of a break, and I will see you guys tomorrow. So have a good afternoon. Thank you.